Glass explodes. A gun barks, and before the waitress can even scream, the most feared man in the city throws himself over her like he's already decided how this ends. Bullets tear into his back, and in that instant, everyone realizes this wasn't a random hit, so why would a mafia boss choose her? If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. Alright, let's get back into it. He'd been watching the black SUV circle the block outside Antonio's diner for the 4th time in 20 minutes. Something reptilian in his brain, the part that survived 3 decades in the underworld, whispered wrong, wrong, wrong. The kind of awareness you don't learn. You earn it. In blood. In betrayals. In the split-second difference between breathing and drowning in your own lung. The passenger window rolled down with mechanical precision. The barrel emerged slow, deliberate, chrome-catching streetlight like a serpent's eye. Cold, patient, hungry. Federico didn't think. Thinking is a luxury for men who don't know what bullets sound like punching through human bone. Get down. His body moved before sound left his throat. The booth where Eva Sosa stood refilling salt shakers was exactly 18 feet away, close enough to smell the cheap lavender hand soap she used between shifts. Far enough that his knees screamed in protest as he exploded forward. His Italian leather shoes found impossible traction on the grease-film tile, his shoulder dropping like he was breaching a door in some war he never officially fought. He hit her like a collapsing building. The waitress, this tired, beautiful woman with second-shift exhaustion in her eyes and a habit of humming old boleros when she thought no one was listening, went sprawling backward, her order pad airborne, coffee pot shattering against laminate. Federico's body covering hers completely, his black suit jacket spreading over her like a shroud, his tattooed hands caging her skull against the floor. The world detonated. Crack, 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 crack. Glass became 1,000 knives. The front window, the one with Antonio's painted in fading red letters, exploded inward in a glittering wave. Vinyl booth seats erupted in foam and leather confetti. The jukebox in the corner died mid-song, Patsy Cline's voice swallowed by chaos. The smell of cordite married with bacon grease and burnt coffee and the copper penny stink of fear. Federico felt something molten punch between his shoulder blades, foreign, invasive, wrong. Then another kiss of fire below his ribs, stealing breath he didn't know he still needed. His back was an inferno. His lungs were drowning on dry land, and beneath him, Eva was screaming. But she was screaming, which meant she was breathing, which meant he'd moved fast enough, which meant some part of him still remembered what it felt like to protect instead of destroy. Someone else was shrieking now. Old man Tony behind the counter, his apron splattered with ketchup that looked too much like what was seeping through Federico's jacket. The cook, Raphael, the ex-Marine who never talked about Fallujah, had already hit the floor. Military instinct overriding civilian shock. The gunfire stopped. 5 seconds, maybe 6. The SUV's engine revved, angry, triumphant, and tires squealed against asphalt as it fishtailed around the corner, disappearing into the rain-slicked night. Silence rushed in like floodwater. Federico's vision collapsed inward, black creeping from the periphery like smoke filling a room. Sound became muffled, distant Eva's voice underwater, car alarms, Doppler shifting through dimensions. His fingers were still locked around her head, protective even as his body betrayed him. He could feel her pulse hammering against his palm. Hummingbird fast. Alive. Mission accomplished. Some dark corner of his brain whispered, "You can let go now." But he couldn't. Wouldn't. Because letting go meant accepting that his body had limits, and Federico Basso had built an empire on the fiction that he didn't bleed like other men. Except he was bleeding now. A lot. Hey, stay with me." Eva's voice cut through the fog, sharper than the pain. Her hands were on his face suddenly, forcing his head up, those brown eyes wide, terrified, furious, filling his entire field of vision. "You don't get to die. Not like this." "Not for me." Federico tried to speak. Managed only a wet cough that tasted like iron and regret. "Someone call 911!" Eva screamed over her shoulder, but her eyes never left his. Her hands moved to his back, pressing against the wounds with surprising strength for someone so small. The pressure sent white-hot agony cascading down his spine, but it also meant she knew what she was doing. Battlefield triage, keeping him from bleeding out on checkered linoleum like some disposable foot soldier. "Who are you?" she whispered, and there was something in her voice that made Federico think she already suspected the answer, that maybe she'd known all along. "What kind of man?" "The kind," Federico rasped, each word costing him oxygen he couldn't afford. Who tips 50%? Her laugh came out broken. Almost a sob. You're insane. Yeah. His vision tunneled further, darkness creeping closer. Probably. The last thing his eyes registered before consciousness slipped was Eva's face. Those wide brown eyes, terrified, yes, but also burning with something primal. Survivor's fury. Recognition of something unspoken passing between two people who'd both spent too long running from things that wouldn't stay buried. And her lips moving, shaping words his failing ears couldn't decode over the tinnitus shriek filling his skull. They don't know what they just started. Then the black took him. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Raphael was already applying pressure to Federico's wounds with dish towels that would never come clean. Old man Tony was stammering into a phone, giving an address he'd given too many times to the police over the years. And Eva, hands slick with blood that wasn't hers, her white shirt ruined. Fries scattered across the floor like casualties stared at the shattered window where bullets had come hunting. She'd seen that SUV before. 3 days ago, parked across from her apartment building. Her father's warnings echoed back from the grave. They don't forget, Mihija. They never forget. She looked down at the man who'd made himself her shield. His face, all hard angles and old scars, looked almost peaceful in unconsciousness. The tattoo on his hand, visible where his sleeve had ridden up, a crowned lion devouring a serpent. She knew that symbol. Everyone in the city knew that symbol. Oh God. Miss? A paramedic was suddenly there, young and earnest, trying to guide her away. Miss, we need space to work. No. Eva's voice came out steel. I'm not leaving him. The paramedic blinked, surprised by the command in her tone. Are you family? Eva looked at the stranger who'd just taken bullets meant for her, who'd moved without hesitation, without calculation, who'd thrown away his own survival for someone he didn't even know. Yes, she lied, and meant it. 3 hours earlier, Federico Basso sat in the corner booth of Antonio's diner the way predators sit back to the wall, eyes on every entrance, calculating exit strategies even in a place that served meatloaf and optimism in equal measure. The suit was Tom Ford, black. No tie tonight, because ties were nooses when you lived the kind of life where enemies came with piano wire and patient smiles. His collar was open, exposing the edge of ink that crawled up his neck, a reminder that money could buy sophistication, but it couldn't erase where you came from. The diner was nearly empty. Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Just the regulars. Old man Tony, wiping down the counter with the same cloth he'd been using since the Clinton administration. Raphael in the kitchen, flipping burgers with one eye on the door, and a kid in the back booth pretending to study while his drug dealer phone buzzed every 5 minutes. And her, the waitress, Eva. Federico didn't know her name yet, hadn't asked, but he'd memorized her face the way you memorize escape routes instinctively, compulsively, because survival demanded cataloging every detail of your environment. She moved through the diner like water finding its path. Efficient, graceful, despite the exhaustion that lived in her shoulders. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had surrendered to gravity hours ago, wisps framing a face that could have sold perfume in magazines if life had dealt her different cards. She refilled his coffee without asking. 3rd time tonight. You want anything else? Her voice carried the slight melody of somewhere south, not Mexico. Maybe El Salvador. Maybe further. Vowels that curved instead of cutting. Kitchen closes in 20. I'm good. Federico's voice came out rougher than intended. 3 decades of cigarettes and shouted orders had left their mark. Thanks. She nodded, already turning away, but not before Federico caught something flicker across her face. Not fear, she didn't know who he was, couldn't possibly know, but wariness. The kind women develop when they've learned that strange men in expensive suits don't sit alone in diners unless they're running from something or hunting it. Smart girl. Federico watched her retreat behind the counter, watched her lean against the coffee station for just a moment, weight off her feet, hand pressed briefly to her lower back. Double shift, maybe triple, the kind of tired that lived in your bones and made rent anyway. He wondered idly what she was running from. Everyone in this city was running from something. The bell above the door chimed. Federico's hand drifted instinctively toward his waistband muscle memory. Useful paranoia, but it was just a couple. Tourists by the looks of their cameras and their complete lack of street awareness. They took a booth by the window, laughing about something on one of their phones. Idiots. Never sit by the window. Eva approached them with menus and that tired smile she wore like armor. Federico found himself studying her again. The way she tilted her head when listening. The calluses on her hands not just from carrying trays. Something else. Something older. Stop, he told himself. She's not your business. Except every instinct he'd honed over 30 years of surviving the unsurvivable was screaming that she was his business. That something about this woman, this exhausted, beautiful stranger who hummed boleros when she thought no one was listening mattered in ways he couldn't yet articulate. The black SUV passed outside for the second time. Federico's spine straightened fractionally. Not the same one as an hour ago. This one had tinted windows and moved too slow for traffic, too fast for someone looking for an address, reconnaissance. But for him? Or something else? He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over a contact labeled only R. One text and 6 men would materialize from the shadows within 3 minutes, but that would reveal his position, shatter whatever thin anonymity he'd carved out in this place. The SUV kept going. Federico exhaled slowly. Maybe he was getting paranoid in his old age. Maybe not every shadow contained a knife. You've been coming here a lot lately. He looked up. Eva stood at his table, coffee pot in hand even though his cup was still half full. Her eyes brown, deep, carrying their own history of violence survived, studied him with the same wariness he'd been aiming at her. Food's good, Federico lied. The food was mediocre at best. The food's terrible. A ghost of a real smile touched her lips. Tony's been using the same grease since 2003. Consistency. Stubbornness. She tilted her head. You're not from around here. It wasn't a question. Federico found himself appreciating the directness. Most people in this city spoke in layers subtext, wrapped in innuendo, wrapped in plausible deniability. I'm from everywhere. True enough. You? Nowhere. Her smile disappeared. Look, I don't mean to pry. You're a good tipper. You don't cause trouble. And in this neighborhood that makes you a unicorn. But, she paused, choosing words carefully. If you're waiting for someone, or watching for someone, or hiding from someone, I just need to know if it's the kind of thing that's going to end with bullets through Tony's window. He's a good man. Doesn't deserve that. Federico felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger. Respect. She'd made him. Not for who he was, she couldn't possibly know that, but for what he was. Dangerous. Careful. The kind of man who wore expensive suits into cheap diners and watched exits like they were salvation. I'm not bringing trouble, he said quietly. And meant it. This place was neutral ground, Switzerland. The one location in the entire city where Federico Basso could pretend he was just a man with too many scars and not enough sleep. Eva studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Okay? I believe you. She turned to leave, then paused. You remind me of my father. He used to sit exactly like that. Back to the wall, eyes on the door. What happened to him? He trusted the wrong people. Her voice carried no emotion. Just fact. Died 3 years ago. Before Federico could respond, she was gone. Back behind the counter, back to humming songs about heartbreak and survival. The SUV passed outside for the 3rd time. Federico's hand moved to his phone, but he never got the chance to dial, because that's when the passenger window rolled down and the barrel emerged, and instinct overrode everything else. Eva had learned to make herself small. It was a survival skill, like checking locks twice or memorizing which floorboards creaked, or knowing exactly how much cash you could carry without attracting the wrong kind of attention. Small meant safe. Small meant invisible. Small meant the ghosts that haunted her father's life might overlook his daughter grinding through double shifts at a diner that smelled like yesterday's hope and decade-old grease. Except ghosts don't forget, and neither do the men who create them. She stood outside Antonio's diner now, watching paramedics load Federico Basso into an ambulance. His blood was still warm on her hands, sticky, cooling, impossible to ignore. Her white uniform shirt was ruined, red blooming across fabric like some obscene flower. The tourists who'd been sitting by the window were giving statements to police, their vacation story now, including the phrase, "We almost died, but they hadn't died. She hadn't died, because a stranger in a Tom Ford suit had made himself a shield." Miss Sosa? Eva turned. The detective was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes that hadn't seen enough horror yet to stop believing in things like justice and closure. His badge read, Detective Morrison. He held a notebook like it contained answers instead of just more questions. I need to ask you some questions about what happened. Someone shot through the window. Eva's voice came out flat. Mechanical. The man in the booth, he pushed me down. Covered me. That's all I know. The man in the booth. Morrison flipped through his notes. Mr. Basso. You know him? He's a regular. How regular? Eva's mind raced. Too much detail and they'd wonder why she'd paid attention. Too little and they'd suspect she was hiding something. He's been coming in for maybe 2 weeks. Sits in the same booth, drinks coffee, tips well, doesn't talk much. All true. All carefully incomplete. Morrison studied her face. You know who he is? A customer, Miss Sosa. The detective's voice gentled. Federico Basso is a very dangerous man. He runs. I know what he runs. The words escaped before Eva could cage them. Morrison's expression shifted. Less sympathy, more calculation. When did you figure it out? When he moved, Eva thought. When he threw himself across 18 feet of diner floor like bullets were something you could outrun if you just wanted it badly enough. When his hands caged my skull with the kind of care you don't learn in boardrooms or learn from accountants. When I saw the tattoo on his hand, the crowned lion devouring the serpent, and remembered my father's warnings about the families that owned this city's shadows. But she said, I didn't. Not until you just told me. Morrison didn't believe her. Eva could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his pen hovered over paper without writing. But he couldn't prove anything, and they both knew it. Did you see the shooters? No. Just the SUV. Black. Tinted windows. License plate? Eva shook her head. Lie. She'd seen it. Memorized it the way her father had taught her to memorize everything that might matter later. But giving it to the police meant questions she couldn't answer. Connections she couldn't afford to acknowledge. Morrison sighed. Closed his notebook. If you remember anything else, I'll call. Another lie. She watched him walk away, joining the cluster of uniforms processing the scene. Crime scene tape cordoned off the diner. Glass crunched under boots. Someone was photographing the bullet holes, 3 in the wall, 2 in the booth, 1 in the jukebox. Raphael stood smoking near the kitchen entrance, his 1,000-yard stare activated by gunfire the way it always was. Old man Tony sat on the curb, holding his head in his hands, probably calculating whether insurance would cover this, or if 40 years of serving coffee and lies was about to end in bankruptcy. Eva's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But in a city where violence bloomed randomly, and people like Federico Basso took bullets for waitresses they barely knew, nothing was random anymore. Yes? Miss Sosa. The voice was smooth, professional, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. Mr. Basso asked that I ensure your safety. A car will arrive in 5 minutes. It will take you somewhere secure. I don't. This is not optional. Still polite. Still absolutely unyielding. The people who did this tonight were not shooting at Mr. Basso alone. Eva's blood turned to ice water. What are you talking about? Your father was Javier Sosa. He kept ledgers for the Ortega family from 2018 to 2021. When he died, certain parties assumed his records died with him. A pause. They were wrong. And now they know you exist. The world tilted sideways. Eva grabbed the wall for support, her father's voice echoing back from 3 years dead. If anything happens to me, Mija, you run. You disappear. You become no one. Because they'll come for you eventually. They always do. How do you know about my father? Mr. Basso makes it his business to know things. The voice softened fractionally. He's also made it his business to keep you alive. I suggest you let him. The line went dead. Eva stared at her phone. At her blood-stained hands. At the shattered window of the only place in this city that had felt even remotely safe. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. Not the SUV from earlier, this one was sleeker, quieter, with a driver who looked like he'd been carved from granite and bad decisions. The back door opened. Eva had choices. She could stay, talk to more detectives with kind eyes and insufficient answers, go back to her apartment with its 3 locks and its persistent draft and its certainty that nowhere was ever truly safe. Or she could get in the car, trust that a man who'd taken bullets for her wasn't the monster her father had warned her about, trust that maybe, just maybe, the enemy of her enemy was something more complicated than either word allowed. Morrison was watching her from across the street. Eva met his eyes. Saw the question there. Are you going willingly? She nodded once. Climbed into the sedan. The door closed with the soft, expensive thunk of German engineering and irrevocable choices. As they pulled away from Antonio's diner, from the only life she'd built from the rubble of her father's death, Eva caught her reflection in the tinted window. She looked like her father in the weeks before he died, hunted, determined, already a ghost. The hospital smelled like bleach and broken promises. Eva sat in a corridor that had seen too many bad nights, her hands finally clean but still feeling stained. The driver he'd introduced himself only as Luca stood near the elevator like a statue carved from vigilance. Other people moved around them. Nurses with exhausted eyes, a janitor pushing a mop bucket that squeaked with each rotation, a woman sobbing into a phone in Spanish about someone who wasn't going to make it. Eva had been in hospitals before, when her father collapsed at the kitchen table, blood vessel bursting in his brain like a final punctuation mark on a life lived too close to fire. The doctors had talked about aneurysms and hereditary weakness and other clinical words that meant nothing except you're alone now. But her father's death had been quiet, neat, no bullets, no glass. No stranger throwing himself into fire without hesitation. Miss Sosa, a surgeon, emerged from the double doors, older, gray-haired, with the kind of steady hands that held lives together with thread and determination. His scrubs had rust-colored stains that laundry would never completely erase. Eva stood. Her legs were unsteady. Is he alive? The surgeon pulled down his mask. Mr. Basso is remarkably resilient. 2 gunshot wounds, one through the right scapula, one through the lower left rib cage. The scapula wound was through and through, missed major vessels. The second nicked his spleen. We removed it. He'll live, though recovery will be extensive. Relief hit Eva like a physical force. Her knees buckled slightly. Luca was there instantly, hand under her elbow, steadying her without a word. Can I see him? She asked. The surgeon hesitated. He's sedated. Won't be conscious for hours. And frankly, Miss Sosa, you've been through trauma yourself. You should go home, rest. I need to see him. Her voice carried an edge that surprised them both. Please. Something in her expression must have convinced him, because the surgeon nodded. 5 minutes. ICU, room 3. He's intubated, so don't be alarmed by the equipment. Federico looked smaller than he had in the diner. It was absurd the man was easily 6'2", built like violence wrapped in expensive fabric but lying in the hospital bed, tubes snaking from his arms and throat, machines beeping their mechanical lullabies. He looked almost vulnerable, human. Eva approached slowly, her footsteps silent on linoleum. His face was pale beneath the oxygen mask, the hard angles softened by sedation. Someone had removed his suit jacket, his shirt, the tattoos she'd glimpsed at his collar extended across his chest and shoulders, intricate work, expensive ink, telling stories she couldn't read. The crowned lion on his hand seemed to watch her. She pulled a chair close to the bed. Saturday. Her fingers hovered over his unbandaged hand, the one without IVs, before settling gently on his knuckles. His skin was warm. Still alive. Still here. You're an idiot, she whispered. You know that? A complete idiot. The machines beeped their indifferent rhythm. I didn't ask you to save me. Didn't ask you to... Her voice cracked. She pressed her free hand to her mouth, forcing the emotion back down where it belonged. Tears were a luxury she'd abandoned 3 years ago, but they came anyway. My father used to say that men like you, men who lived in the shadows, couldn't afford to be heroes. That heroism was for people who didn't understand how the world really worked. Eva's thumb traced the edge of Federico's tattoo. He said that if you ever saw someone like him move without thinking, run, because instinct without calculation meant they'd finally lost control. And out-of-control men were the most dangerous kind. She laughed bitterly. But you didn't look out of control. You looked certain, like you'd made a choice before your brain even processed there was a choice to make. The door opened quietly. Eva looked up. 3 men entered, not doctors, not nurses. They moved like Luca. Economical, alert, dangerous in that casual way that came from practice. The first was older, 50-something, with silver threading his dark hair and eyes that had seen too many rooms like this. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Eva's monthly rent. Miss Sosa. His voice was the one from the phone. I'm Tommaso Ricci. I handle Mr. Basso's business interests. You're his lawyer, Eva said flatly. Among other things. Tommaso's gaze flicked to where her hand rested on Federico's. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, or concern. The doctors tell us he'll recover fully. Thanks, in large part to your quick thinking. Applying pressure to his wounds likely kept him from bleeding out. I didn't do anything special. You didn't run. Tommaso moved closer, his companions flanking the door. When most people see that much blood, they panic, freeze. You kept him alive. Eva withdrew her hand from Federico's, suddenly aware of how this must look, the waitress playing at intimacy with a man whose world she didn't belong to. Your driver said people were shooting at me too, that it wasn't just about him. It wasn't. Tommaso's expression hardened. We've identified the shooters, contract killers out of Newark, hired by the remnants of the Ortega family. Your father kept very detailed records of their operations, Miss Sosa. When he died, they assumed those records were destroyed, but someone recently indicated otherwise. I don't have any records. I don't know anything about. They don't care what you know. They care what you might know. Tommaso's voice was gentle, but the words were knives. Your father was careful, paranoid. The kind of man who would have contingency plans. They believe he told you something, gave you something, and they won't stop until they're certain he didn't. The room felt smaller suddenly, airless. So what happens now? Now, Mr. Basso's organization ensures your safety. Tommaso glanced at the man in the bed. He's already given orders. You'll be moved to a secure location. Guards, new identity if necessary, whatever it takes. Why? Eva's voice rose despite herself. He doesn't even know me. I'm nobody. You're the woman he took 2 bullets for. Tommaso's tone brooked no argument. Which makes you somebody to him, and therefore somebody to us. Eva looked back at Federico. At the steady rise and fall of his chest, at machines keeping rhythm with a heartbeat that should have stopped on diner tile. He said something, she whispered. Before he passed out, I couldn't hear most of it, but... She met Tommaso's eyes. He said, "Mission accomplished." Tommaso's jaw tightened. He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. "That's Federico," he said quietly. "Once he decides you're worth protecting, God himself couldn't change his mind." The machines beeped. Eva stayed in her chair, and outside, the city continued its slow rotation toward dawn. Federico woke to the taste of copper and consequences. The intubation tube was gone, replaced by an oxygen cannula that felt like insects crawling in his nostrils. His back was fire. His side was knives. Every breath reminded him that he'd made a choice, paid the price, and somehow survived to regret nothing. The room was dark, private, expensive, not the kind of hospital room ordinary people occupied. Tommaso sat in the corner, reading something on his phone, a cup of coffee cooling on the windowsill beside him. He looked up when Federico shifted, his expression carefully neutral in that way that meant everything had gone to hell while Federico was unconscious. "How long?" Federico's voice came out gravel and broken glass. 18 hours. It's Wednesday evening. Tommaso stood, approaching the bed with the wariness of a man who'd seen Federico tear IVs out before doctors cleared him for movement. "Before you ask, she's safe. Secured location. Luca and 2 others." The tension in Federico's shoulders eased fractionally. The shooters? Dead. Both of them. Found in a drainage ditch off Route 9 with their throats cut. Tommaso's voice carried no emotion, just information. "Someone beat us to them." Federico's eyes sharpened despite the morphine. "Who?" "That's the interesting question." Tommaso pulled up the chair Eva had occupied, sat like they were discussing quarterly earnings instead of corpses. "The contract came from the Ortega family, what's left of it after you dismantled them in 2022. Specifically, from Hector Ortega's younger brother, Luis. Luis is supposed to be in Spain. He was. Came back 3 weeks ago. Quiet, no flags, no alerts. Which means he had help staying invisible." Tommaso leaned forward. "Federico, they didn't come for you. Or, they didn't only come for you. The girl was the primary target." Federico's jaw tightened. Pain radiated from the movement, but he ignored it. "Explain." "Eva Sosa, 26 years old, works double shifts at Antonio's diner, lives in a studio apartment in the Garfield district, has $17,000 in student debt, and about $800 in savings. Clean record. Quiet life." Tommaso paused. Her father was Javier Sosa. Ran numbers for the Ortega family from 2018 to 2021. When you took them apart, Javier disappeared from their operations 6 months before the collapse. Died of an aneurysm in 2022. Natural causes. Not natural enough for Luis to believe it. "Exactly." Tommaso pulled out his phone, swiped to a document. "We pulled Javier's medical records. The aneurysm was real hereditary condition, time bomb waiting to explode, but Luis thinks it was induced. Thinks we killed him to keep him quiet. We didn't." "I know. You would have told me." Tommaso's voice carried the weight of 20 years working together. "But Luis doesn't know that. And worse, he believes Javier kept insurance. Detailed records of Ortega family operations. Names, dates, accounts, the kind of information that could put people in prison, or worse. Federico's mind worked through pain and medication. Does this insurance exist? Unknown. Javier was careful, paranoid, the kind of man who'd have contingency plans. Tommaso met Federico's eyes. If those records exist, Eva would be the most likely person to have them, or know where they are. Does she? She says no. I believe her. Tommaso hesitated. But Luis won't. And now that we've intervened, now that you've taken bullets for her, he'll assume you're protecting her because she has something valuable. Federico closed his eyes. The morphine was wearing off, replaced by the sharp clarity that came from years of calculating moves and counter-moves. We've made her more valuable by protecting her. Yes, and Luis will escalate. Already has. Tommaso's voice hardened. 2 of our street captains were approached yesterday, offered 7 figures to deliver the girl. They declined, obviously, but the offers are out there. Luis is spreading money around like it's air, trying to find someone hungry enough or stupid enough to betray you. He won't find anyone. Federico's certainty was absolute, not arrogance mathematics. He'd spent 3 decades building an organization where loyalty wasn't purchased but engineered, where betrayal carried consequences that made death look merciful. Probably not within our organization, Tommaso agreed. But Luis doesn't need to crack your inner circle. He just needs one desperate dealer, one indebted gambler, one person who sees an opportunity and thinks they're clever enough to take it. Federico opened his eyes. Where is she now? The safe house on Riverside, the one we used for the Castellano witness in 2023. Secure building, controlled access, 24-hour surveillance. She's comfortable. Scared, but comfortable. Has she tried to leave? Tommaso's mouth quirked. 3 times. Luca talked her down twice. The 3rd time she made it to the parking garage before Matteo intercepted her. She's resourceful. Despite everything, the pain, the implications, the cascading consequences of one instinctive act, Federico felt something that might have been admiration. She doesn't trust us. Can you blame her? Her father worked for men like us and ended up dead. Now she's being held by another man like us, told it's for her protection. Tommaso shook his head. She thinks this is a cage with better furniture. It is. Federico stated the truth flatly. But it's a cage that keeps her breathing. She asked about you. Multiple times. Tommaso watched Federico's face carefully. Wanted to know if you were awake. If you were in pain. If the doctors were telling the truth about your recovery. Federico said nothing. There was nothing to say. Federico. Tommaso's voice dropped, taking on the tone he used when speaking as friend rather than consigliere. I need to understand what we're doing here. This girl Eva, she's a civilian, a witness at best, a liability at worst. The logical move is to secure her, extract any information she has, and relocate her somewhere Luis can't reach. Give her a new identity, enough money to start over, and walk away. No. Then what's the play? Federico met his oldest friend's eyes. We didn't start this. Luis did. He broke the rules, attacked neutral ground, targeted a civilian, tried to kill a woman who's done nothing except inherit the wrong last name. His voice was cold, absolute. So now we finish it. We dismantle what's left of the Ortega family. We make sure Luis understands that some things have costs he can't afford to pay. That's war, Federico. Yes, over a waitress. Federico's expression didn't change. Over the principle that when someone shoots at what's mine, they don't get to walk away. Tommaso studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll make the calls. Mobilize everyone. But Federico, she's going to ask questions. About who you are, what you do, why any of this matters. Then we tell her the truth. All of it? Federico thought about Eva's hands pressing against his wounds, keeping him alive when easier choices existed. About her voice in the darkness, calling him an idiot with tears in her eyes. About the way she'd looked at him in the diner, wary but curious, afraid but not running. Enough of it, he said finally. Enough that she understands. Tommaso stood. I'll set up a meeting. Tomorrow, when you're stronger. Tonight, Federico. Tonight, Federico repeated. She deserves to know why her life just became a war zone, and she deserves to hear it from me. The safe house was a lie wrapped in marble and crown molding. Eva stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse apartment, watching the city sprawl beneath her like a circuit board of lights and broken promises. Riverside. She'd walked past this building 100 times, never imagining people actually lived in places like this. 3,000 square feet of ruthless elegance, the kind of space that whispered money in a language only certain people understood. Behind her, Luca stood near the door, silent, present. A human reminder that luxury was just another word for prison when you couldn't leave. Her phone buzzed. 4th time in an hour. Her manager at Antonio's, probably, wondering why she'd missed her shift. Or maybe Detective Morrison, fishing for answers she couldn't give. She'd stopped checking after the 2nd call. The elevator chimed. Eva turned, pulse spiking. Luca straightened fractionally, the only indication that whoever was arriving mattered. The doors opened. Federico Basso stepped out, and Eva's breath caught. He moved like a man accounting for damage with every step, careful, deliberate, but upright. No wheelchair, no assistance. Just Federico in black pants and a charcoal Henley that did nothing to hide the bandages beneath. His face pale but composed, his eyes finding hers with the same intensity she remembered from the diner. "You shouldn't be walking," Eva said. The words escaped before she could calculate something more appropriate. "Probably not." Federico's voice was rougher than she remembered, scraped raw by intubation and proximity to death. "But we need to talk, and I do that better standing." Tommaso emerged behind him, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression that suggested he'd lost the argument about whether Federico should be vertical. 2 other men followed security, obviously, though they tried to pretend otherwise. "I'll give you privacy," Tommaso said, but he was looking at Federico when he said it, a question embedded in courtesy. Federico nodded once. The men retreated to the far side of the penthouse, out of earshot but not out of sight. Eva and Federico studied each other across expensive carpet that had never known spilled coffee or tracked in rain. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "How am I?" Eva laughed, a sharp sound without humor. "You took 2 bullets and you're asking how I'm feeling? You watched someone get shot. That leaves marks that don't bleed." Federico moved slowly to the leather sofa, lowered himself with the kind of control that came from refusing to show weakness. "Sit, please." Eva hesitated, then crossed the room, choosing the chair opposite him instead of the sofa. Distance, boundaries, small rebellions against the careful choreography of whatever this conversation was. "Tommaso says you've tried to leave 3 times, Federico said. "Tommaso shouldn't have stopped me." "Where would you go?" "My apartment. My life. The world where I make my own choices." Eva's voice sharpened. "You don't get to save me and then own me." "I don't want to own you." Federico's expression didn't change, but something in his tone made Eva pause. "I want to keep you alive. Those are different things." "Are they? Because from where I'm sitting, they look pretty similar." "Then let me explain the difference." Federico leaned forward slightly, winced, settled back. 3 days ago, you were invisible to the people who run this city's shadows. Just another waitress in another diner that would burn down or get gentrified or fade into nothing. You were safe because you were nobody. Eva flinched at the word. Nobody. It landed like a slap. "Now," Federico continued, voice steady, "you're the woman Federico Basso took bullets for, which means you're somebody, which means every enemy I have, and I have many, is trying to calculate what you're worth. Why I'd break cover, violate neutral ground, and risk my life for a stranger. So this is about your reputation. This is about mathematics." Federico's eyes held hers. "Luis Ortega believes your father stole insurance-detailed records of family operations. He believes you have access to those records. And now, because I protected you, he believes those records are valuable enough that I'd go to war over them." Eva's mouth went dry. "I don't have any records. I don't know anything about—" "I know." Federico's certainty cut through her protest. "Tommaso investigated. Your father was careful, yes, but he was also dying. Men facing death don't leave complicated puzzles for their daughters. They leave apologies and unpaid debts." He paused. "But Luis doesn't know that. And even if he did, he wouldn't care. You're a loose end. And men like Luis don't sleep well with loose ends hanging." The city lights blurred as Eva's eyes burned. She refused to let the tears fall. "So what happens now? I live here forever? Become some kept thing in a gilded cage? No." The word was absolute. "Now I dismantle what's left of the Ortega family. I make sure Luis understands that attacking you, attacking anyone under my protection, carries costs he can't afford. And then, when it's safe, you go back to your life. Just like that. Just like that." Eva studied his face, searching for the lie. But Federico Basso looked at her the way he'd looked at her in the diner, direct, unflinching, carrying the weight of choices already made. "Why?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "Why did you do it? You don't know me. I'm nothing to you." Federico was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something Eva hadn't expected. Honesty without calculation. "When I was 19, I watched my sister get caught in crossfire. Gang dispute. Wrong place. Wrong time. I was 10 feet away. Close enough to see it happen. Too far to stop it." His jaw tightened. "She survived. Barely. Spent 6 months learning to walk again. And I spent 6 months learning that distance is just another word for failure." Eva's breath caught. "In the diner," Federico continued, "I saw the gun, calculated the trajectory, knew someone was about to die, and I was close enough." He met her eyes. "So I moved? Not because I'm a hero. Not because I calculated the strategic value. But because this time, I was close enough to do something about it." The silence between them felt heavy, loaded with truths that couldn't be taken back. "I don't trust you," Eva said finally. "Good." Federico's mouth quirked, not quite a smile, but close. "Trust is earned. Right now I'm just asking you to let me keep you alive long enough to earn it. And if I refuse? Then Luca will continue to intercept you in parking garages." The almost smile faded. "Eva, I'm not asking for your permission. I'm asking for your cooperation. One makes this easier. The other just makes it more frustrating for both of us." Eva should have been angry, should have thrown his arrogance back in his face. But there was something disarming about Federico's bluntness, the way he didn't dress up, control his care, didn't pretend kidnapping was rescue. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Nothing." Federico stood slowly, carefully. "I want you to eat, sleep, recover from trauma, watch television, read books, be bored. And when this is over, I want you to walk out of here the same person who walked into Antonio's diner to start her shift. That person doesn't exist anymore. I know." Something like regret crossed Federico's face. "But we can try to get close." He moved toward the elevator, each step a negotiation with pain. "Federico." He turned. "Your sister," Eva said. "Is she alive, married, 2 kids, lives in Oregon and hasn't spoken to me in 8 years?" His expression was unreadable. "Some people you save don't want to be reminded of what they were saved from." The elevator doors closed. Eva sat in the silence of the penthouse prison, watching the city breathe, and wondered which kind of person she would be. Luis Ortega learned about the bodies at 3 a.m. The call came from his cousin, Mateo, whose voice carried the kind of panic that made bad situations exponentially worse. The 2 contract killers, expensive, professional, guaranteed results, had been found in a drainage ditch with their throats opened ear to ear. No identification, no phones, no evidence except the message carved into what they'd been. "You missed." Luis stood in the window of his hotel suite, the Cosmopolitan, 20th floor, paid in cash through 3 shell corporations, and watched the city pretend to sleep. Behind him, his remaining lieutenants waited for orders that Luis wasn't sure how to give. Federico Basso had just declared war without firing a shot. Across the city, Federico's organization moved like a surgical instrument through infected tissue. Tommaso orchestrated from a conference room that smelled like coffee and controlled violence. 6 monitors displayed real-time information, financial transactions, surveillance footage, intercepted communications. 20 years of building an intelligence network more sophisticated than most government agencies was about to justify its cost. "Luis Ortega has been moving money," said Petrov, their financial specialist, 40-something, former FSB, loyalty purchased with asylum and purpose. His fingers danced across keyboards. 11 transfers in the last 72 hours, routing through Cayman, Luxembourg, Singapore. Trying to hide the trail, but he's sloppy. "How much?" Tommaso asked. "Total? Approximately 8 million. Small amounts, different accounts. Building a war chest. Freeze it." Petrov's smile was cold. "Already working on it. By morning, Luis will have access to maybe 2 million. The rest will be locked in bureaucratic limbo for months." Tommaso nodded. Money was oxygen to men like Luis. Cut off the supply and they suffocated slowly, making desperate choices. What about his people? Isabella Rodriguez, head of security, ex-Marine. Scars that told stories about Kandahar and choices that haunted pulled up another screen. Luis brought 6 men with him from Spain. "We've identified 4. Marco Ruiz, Diego Castellanos, Paulo Vega, and someone using the name Santiago, who's probably former cartel. The other 2 are ghosts. Where are they staying?" "Spread out. 3 different hotels, 2 rental properties. Smart harder to hit them all at once." Isabella zoomed in on surveillance footage. But their meeting, coffee shops, parks, public places. Yesterday, Luis met with someone interesting. The image showed Luis sitting across from a man in an expensive suit. Older, distinguished, carrying himself like violence was beneath him even though everyone knew better. Tommaso leaned forward. That's Gerald Kramer. He's supposed to be retired. Apparently retirement is flexible. Isabella pulled up Kramer's file. Former attorney for half the families on the East Coast. Specialized in making problems disappear legally. If Luis is talking to him, he's building a legal shield. Tommaso's jaw tightened. Preparing for when this goes public. Lawsuits, injunctions, police reports, trying to tie our hands with bureaucracy. Will it work? Not even a little. Tommaso's smile was predatory. But it means Luis is scared. He's not thinking about winning anymore. He's thinking about surviving. Federico watched the operations from his hospital bed, discharged against medical advice after 36 hours. The doctors had protested. Federico had ignored them. War didn't wait for surgical wounds to heal. And this was war cold, calculated. The kind where bodies dropped quietly and the law arrived too late to matter. His tablet displayed the same feeds Tommaso watched. He'd built this organization to operate like a machine. Efficient, ruthless, capable of dismantling threats without his direct involvement. But this felt different. Personal. Every move was about Eva, whether his people understood that or not. His phone buzzed. Tommaso, Luis just lost access to 6 million, his consigliere reported. He's panicking. Made 4 calls in the last hour, all to people who won't answer. His lieutenants are nervous. Good. Keep the pressure steady. I want him making mistakes. Federico. Tommaso's voice shifted. Diego Castellanos tried to contact someone in our organization, offering information in exchange for protection. Who did he contact? Junior. He declined. Reported it immediately. Junior, real name Christopher Park, 28. Brilliant with computers and utterly loyal, had worked for Federico since he was 19. The fact that Luis's people were approaching him meant they were more desperate than anticipated. Let Diego make contact again, Federico said. This time, Junior accepts. We set up a meeting. You want to flip him? I want to understand what Luis is really after. Federico shifted, pain radiating from his wounds. Diego's not a soldier. He's an accountant pretending to be hard. The moment he thinks we're winning, he'll tell us everything. And if it's a trap, then Diego learns that traps work both ways. Eva saw the news 3 days after the diner shooting. She'd been watching a cooking show, mindless, safe, requiring nothing but occasional attention when the program cut to breaking news. A warehouse fire in the industrial district. No casualties reported, but investigators suspected arson. The warehouse belonged to a shipping company. The news didn't mention that the shipping company was one of 36 shell corporations Luis Ortega used to move money and merchandise. Eva wasn't stupid. She understood what she was watching. Federico's organization, erasing Luis's infrastructure piece by piece. Luca brought her dinner Thai food from a place she'd never afford on a waitress salary, probably delivered by someone who'd been vetted 6 ways from Sunday. He set it on the counter without comment. How many? Eva asked. Luca paused. How many what? Buildings, businesses, people. She muted the television. How many things has Federico destroyed since the shooting? Luca studied her face, calculating what truth she could handle. 14 properties. 37. Accounts frozen or seized. 0 casualties on our side. 0 civilian casualties. But Luis's people are learning that attacking Federico Basso has consequences. Luca's voice carried no emotion, just fact. You want me to apologize for that? No. Eva turned back to the television, where firefighters battled flames that looked almost beautiful in the darkness. I want to understand what kind of man does this. Tears apart an entire organization without breaking a sweat. The kind who keeps his promises. Luca moved toward the door. He said he'd keep you safe. He said he'd end this. He's doing both. After Luca left, Eva sat in the too expensive silence and thought about her father. About the stories he'd told her when she was young, before she understood what he really did. Stories about men who built empires in shadows, who spoke softly and carried terrible certainty. Be careful of the quiet ones, Mija, he'd said once. The ones who don't need to shout. Those are the dangerous ones. Those are the ones who've learned that power doesn't need to be loud to be absolute. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against every instinct, Eva answered. Eva Sosa. The voice was accented Spanish, but older, refined. Luis. We should talk. Her blood turned cold. How did you get this number? I'm resourceful. And I'm reasonable. Whatever Federico is paying you to hide, I'll triple it. Just give me what your father left behind. I don't have anything. Then give me something else. Information. Access. Proof that Federico is the monster everyone says he is. Luis's voice softened. Help me, and I'll make sure you survive this. Refuse. And Eva hung up. Her hands were shaking. She should tell Luca. Tell Tommaso. Tell someone that Luis had breached their security, gotten her number, made contact. Instead, she walked to the window and watched the city burn in small, controlled increments, and wondered how long before the fire reached her. Eva told Federico about the call the next morning. She'd spent the night weighing silence against honesty, calculating which choice would cost less. By dawn, exhaustion made the decision for her. Secrets were currency in Federico's world, and she'd already learned that withholding them carried interest she couldn't afford. He arrived at the penthouse at 8 a.m., moving better than yesterday but still carrying damage in the set of his shoulders. Tommaso accompanied him, along with a woman Eva hadn't met mid-30s, dark hair pulled severe, eyes that catalogued threats the way other people catalogued grocery lists. This is Isabella, Federico said, head of security. If Luis contacted you, she needs to know everything. Eva recounted the call, every word she could remember, every inflection, every pause. Isabella recorded it on her phone, her expression unchanging as Eva described Luis's offer. He's getting desperate, Isabella said when Eva finished. Reaching out directly means his other channels are failing, or it's psychological warfare, Tommaso added, making her feel unsafe even here, undermining her trust in our security. It's working, Eva said quietly. If he can get my number, what else can he reach? Federico's jaw tightened. He looked at Isabella. How? Unknown. Could be a leak, could be sophisticated hacking, could be simple social engineering. Isabella's tone was professional, clinical. We'll trace it. Change her number. Add additional security protocols. But Federico. She hesitated. She's right to be concerned. If Luis is this motivated, he'll keep trying. Then we accelerate, Federico said. How long until we have Diego? Meeting set for tonight. Junior's playing nervous, like he's worried about getting caught helping. Diego's eager. Tommaso pulled up his tablet. We've selected a location abandoned office building in the garment district. Controlled environment, multiple exits, clean sightlines. I want to be there, Federico said. You can barely stand for 10 minutes without bleeding through your bandages, Tommaso replied. Send Isabella, but you need to heal. I need to finish this. The two men stared at each other, decades of partnership compressed into a silent conversation Eva couldn't decode. Finally, Tommaso nodded. You stay in the car. If shooting starts, you don't engage. Agreed. Isabella looked skeptical, but said nothing. Eva recognized the expression, the resignation of people who'd lost too many arguments to waste energy on battles they wouldn't win. I want to come, Eva said. 3 sets of eyes turned to her. Absolutely not, Federico said. He's doing this because of me. Because of whatever he thinks I have or know. Or, Eva's voice strengthened. I deserve to understand what's happening. To see the people who decided I'm worth killing. You deserve to stay alive, Federico countered. Which means staying here, where it's safe. Safe, Eva laughed bitterly. He called me here, in your fortress, in your safe house. There's no safe anymore, Federico. There's just different degrees of danger. Federico studied her face. Eva held his gaze, refusing to flinch. She's not wrong, Isabella said quietly. And having her there might actually be useful. If Diego's hesitating, seeing the person he's been paid to hunt might push him to cooperate faster. Or it puts a target in the room, Tommaso argued. The target's already in every room she occupies, Isabella replied. At least this way, we control the environment. Federico closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they'd gone cold, the expression Eva recognized from the diner, the one that made him look less like a man, and more like the mechanism of violence he'd built his life around. Fine. But you stay in the vehicle. Bulletproof glass, armored plating, Isabella beside you the entire time. You don't exit under any circumstances. Understood? Eva nodded. Say it. I don't exit under any circumstances. Good. Federico turned to Tommaso. Set it up. And Tommaso, if anything goes wrong, your priority is getting her out. Not me, not Junior. Her. Tommaso's expression flickered surprise, maybe concern, but he nodded. Understood. That afternoon, Eva found Federico on the penthouse balcony. He stood at the railing, looking out over the city with the stillness of a man accustomed to watching empires from high places. His shirt was different, black, loose, probably chosen to hide fresh bandages. The wind moved through his dark hair, gray threading the temples in ways that made him look distinguished rather than old. Eva approached slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "You'll ask regardless of my answer." His mouth quirked slightly. "Your sister, the one who got shot." Eva leaned against the railing, maintaining distance. "You said she doesn't talk to you. Why?" Federico was quiet for a long moment. "Because I became the thing that hurt her. Not literally, I didn't pull the trigger, but I stayed in this world, built an organization, made myself into exactly the kind of man who creates crossfire." He glanced at her. "She wanted me to choose differently. I couldn't." "Couldn't or wouldn't?" "Both." He turned to face her fully. "By the time she recovered, I was already too deep. Too much blood, too many debts, too many people depending on me. Walking away would have meant abandoning responsibilities I'd created, so she walked away instead." "Do you regret it?" "Every day." The honesty in his voice caught Eva off guard. "But regret doesn't change mathematics. I made choices. They had consequences. Her safety was one of them. She's alive, has a life far from this, and will never have to explain to her children what their uncle actually does." Eva absorbed this. "Is that what you're trying to do for me? Push me away so I can have a normal life?" "I'm trying to keep you breathing long enough to choose what kind of life you want." Federico's eyes held hers. "Normal, abnormal, somewhere in between, but alive. That's the only variable I'm trying to control. What if I don't want to be controlled? Then you'll fight me every step of the way, make this infinitely more complicated, and probably survive out of pure stubbornness." The corner of his mouth lifted. "You remind me of her sometimes. My sister. Same fire. Same refusal to accept that some people know better." "Maybe some people don't know better," Eva said. "Maybe they just know different." Federico studied, her face really looked. Not the tactical assessment from the diner, but something deeper, more human. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more afraid, more willing to let others make decisions." He paused. "Someone easier to protect." "Disappointment looks good on you," Eva said dryly. Federico laughed, actually laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. Then he winced, hand going to his side where the bullet had stolen his spleen. "You shouldn't laugh," Eva said, moving closer instinctively. "You'll tear something, probably." But he didn't stop smiling. "Worth it, though." They stood together on the balcony, watching the city prepare for dusk. Somewhere below, Luis Ortega was planning his next move. Diego Castellanos was preparing to betray him. And the machinery of Federico's organization was moving toward collision with the kind of precision that looked effortless from above. "Tonight," Eva said quietly, "when we go to this meeting, what happens if it goes wrong?" "It won't. But if it does?" Federico turned to face her fully. "Then Isabella gets you out. And I make sure whoever comes for you regrets every decision that led them to that moment. You'd die for me." "Not a question. A statement of observed fact." "I already almost did." Federico's voice was matter of fact. "Turns out I'm committed now. Might as well see it through." Eva should have been disturbed by his casualness about death. Instead, she found it strangely comforting, this man who spoke about sacrifice the way other people discussed weather, who'd made her survival a mathematical certainty through sheer force of will. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I know I haven't said it, but—" "Don't." Federico's tone gentled. "Gratitude implies debt. You don't owe me anything, Eva. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I was close enough to do something about it. That's all." But his eyes said different. And Eva, watching him watch her, understood that Federico Basso was a liar when it came to his own motivations. The sun began its descent. In 6 hours, they would drive into the garment district, and everything would change. The building looked like it had given up decades ago. 6 stories of crumbling brick and broken windows, graffiti declaring territory for gangs that no longer existed. The garment district had once thrived, factories humming, immigrants building futures from thread and determination. Now, it was just real estate waiting for developers with enough vision to see past the decay. Perfect for a meeting no one wanted witnessed. Eva sat in the back of the armored SUV, Isabella beside her, watching Federico and Tommaso confer near the building's entrance. Junior stood with them, young, nervous energy barely contained, laptop bag slung over his shoulder like a student heading to class rather than a trap. "He'll be fine," Isabella said, reading Eva's expression. "Junior's smart, knows when to run, and if Diego brings backup, then we handle it." Isabella's hand rested casually near her concealed weapon. "This is what we do, Eva. Calculate risk, mitigate variables, adapt when things go sideways. Does it always go sideways?" "Usually." Isabella's smile was grim. "But we're still here, which means we're better at adapting than the people trying to kill us." Through the tinted windows, Eva watched Diego Castellanos arrive. Mid-40s, soft around the middle, wearing a jacket too expensive for this neighborhood. He looked exactly like what he was an accountant playing at being dangerous, realizing too late that numbers on spreadsheets translated to bodies in ditches. Junior approached him, shook hands. Nervous laughter carried on the wind. They disappeared into the building. "Now we wait," Isabella said. Federico returned to the SUV, sliding into the passenger seat with careful movements that betrayed his injuries. Tommaso took the driver's seat. They all wore earpieces connected to Junior's wire. "Testing," Junior's voice crackled through. "Can you hear me?" "Confirmed," Tommaso replied. "Proceed." Static, footsteps echoing in empty space. Then Diego's voice hushed and urgent. "You're sure no one followed you?" "Positive. I was careful." Junior's tone was perfect, scared but greedy. Exactly what Diego needed to hear. "But I need to know what I'm getting into. What does Luis want?" "The girl, Eva Sosa. Information about where Federico's keeping her." Eva's breath caught. Isabella's hand found her arm, steadying. "Why her?" Junior pressed. "She's nobody, just a waitress. She has something, records her father kept. Luis needs them before Federico figures out they exist." Diego's voice dropped further. "He's offering $2 million, one for information, one for delivery." "Delivery?" Junior let appropriate horror creep into his tone. "You mean, alive. Luis wants her alive. Whatever she knows, he needs to extract it first." Through the earpiece, Eva heard Junior's calculated pause. "And after? After he gets what he wants?" Diego said nothing. The silence answered everything. "Jesus," Junior whispered. I knew this was serious, but $2 million, Christopher." Diego's voice hardened. "Enough to disappear. Start over. Be anyone you want to be anywhere in the world. All you have to do is tell me where she is." I need to think about it." "You have 12 hours. Luis is leaving the city soon. Either you're in, or you're a liability. And Luis doesn't leave liabilities breathing." Footsteps. Movement. The sound of a door opening. "Diego." Junior's voice stopped him. "If I do this, if I help, how do I know Luis won't just kill me anyway? Tie up loose ends?" "You don't." Diego's laugh was bitter. "But you know for certain that Federico will kill you if he finds out you're even considering it. At least with Luis you have a chance." More footsteps. Then silence. "He's gone," Junior said quietly. "Did you get all that?" "Every word," Tommaso replied. "Well done. Exit the building, head south 2 blocks. We'll pick you up." In the SUV, Federico's expression had gone absolutely cold. Eva had seen him angry, had seen him in pain, seen him calculating. But this was different. This was the face of a man who'd just had his suspicions confirmed and was now moving pieces toward checkmate. "He thinks I'm looking for records," Federico said quietly. "Which means he doesn't know they don't exist. He's operating on paranoia and assumption. Makes him easier to manipulate," Isabella observed. "Fear of unknown information is more powerful than actual information." "It also means he won't stop," Eva said. Everyone turned to look at her. "Even if you tell him the records don't exist, he won't believe you. He can't afford to. Because if they do exist and someone else finds them first." "He's exposed," Federico finished. "Yes, which means this ends one way. Luis has to disappear," Tommaso said. Not a question, a conclusion they'd all reached simultaneously. "Not disappear." Federico's voice was absolute. "That leaves doubt. Leaves his people wondering if he's in hiding, planning revenge. We need certainty. We need everyone to know that Luis Ortega came for what was mine and paid the price." Eva should have been horrified, should have protested the casual discussion of execution. But she thought about the call Luis's voice offering money while planning her death. Thought about Diego's silence when asked what happened after. Thought about spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering if today was the day Luis decided to try again. "How?" she asked. Federico looked at her. You don't need to know the details. Yes, I do. Eva's voice was steady. This is happening because of me. Because of something I supposedly have. I deserve to know how it ends. Federico studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Luis is meeting with Gerald Kramer tomorrow, his lawyer. Probably finalizing contingency plans, legal protection, preparing for extended conflict. The meeting is at Kramer's office, neutral ground, public location, security cameras everywhere, so you can't touch him there, Eva said. No, but he has to leave eventually. And when he does, Federico's expression didn't change. Accidents happen, brake failures, gas leaks. Heart attacks aren't uncommon in men under stress. You're going to make it look natural. I'm going to make it look like Luis Ortega's paranoia finally caught up with his health. Federico's tone was matter of fact. His people will scatter, his operations will collapse. And you'll be forgotten, just another civilian who briefly intersected with business that didn't concern her. Junior appeared at the vehicle's door. Tommaso unlocked it, and he slid in, still carrying nervous energy but now mixed with relief. That was intense, Junior said, pulling off his wire. Diego's terrified. He'll probably try to run before his 12 hours are up. Let him, Federico said. We have what we need. Confirmation that Luis is operating on false assumptions. That gives us leverage. What about Diego? Junior asked. Nothing. He's a coward and a traitor, but he's also smart enough to disappear properly once he realizes Luis is gone. Federico looked at Tommaso. Any word on Luis's location? Hotel. He's ordered room service, settled in for the night. Tomorrow morning he meets Kramer at 9 a.m., Federico nodded. Then tomorrow morning, Luis Ortega stops being a problem. The drive back to the safe house was silent. Eva watched the city pass lights and shadows, people living lives that didn't include armored vehicles and casual discussions of murder. She wondered if she'd ever be one of those people again. If normal was something you could return to, or if violence was a stain that never fully washed out. You're quiet, Isabella observed, thinking. About? Whether I'm supposed to feel guilty, Eva said. About Luis. About what's going to happen to him. Are you? Feeling guilty? Eva considered the question honestly, thought about the diner, the glass, Federico's blood pooling on checkered tile, the sound of her own screaming. Luis's voice on the phone, so reasonable while planning her death. No, she said finally. I'm not. Isabella nodded. Good. Guilt is for people who had choices. You didn't choose any of this. Neither did Federico, Eva said quietly. He could have let me die. Should have, probably. Would have been easier. Easier isn't always right. Isabella looked at her, and Federico stopped choosing easy a long time ago. Luis Ortega died at 9:47 a.m. on a Thursday. The official report would call it a heart attack, tragic, unexpected, but not uncommon in men with his stress levels and family history. He collapsed in the lobby of Gerald Kramer's office building. Witnesses reporting he'd seemed agitated, pale, complaining of chest pain before dropping to the marble floor. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes. Too late. Eva learned about it from the news, watching the same television that had shown her burning warehouses and financial ruin. The reporter described Luis as a businessman, made vague references to alleged organized crime connections, and moved on to weather. Just like that. A man who'd tried to have her killed was gone, reduced to 30 seconds of airtime, and a footnote in the city's endless catalog of violence. Federico stood at the penthouse windows, watching the same broadcast reflected in glass. He'd returned an hour ago, moving better now. The worst of his injuries downgraded from critical to merely painful. Tommaso had already left to manage the aftermath, ensuring Luis's people understood the message, confirming that no retaliation was coming, dismantling what remained of the Ortega organization with surgical precision. It's done, Federico said quietly. Eva turned off the television. The silence felt enormous. How do you feel? Satisfied? Tired? He glanced at her. Not guilty, if that's what you're asking. I wasn't. Yes, you were. Federico moved to the sofa, lowered himself with decreasing difficulty. You're wondering what kind of man kills someone and feels nothing. Wondering if you should be afraid of me. Should I be? Probably. His honesty was absolute. I'm not a good man, Eva. I've done things that would horrify you, hurt people, destroyed lives, built an empire on choices that most people couldn't live with. He met her eyes. But I've never hurt anyone who didn't come for me or mine first. And I've never killed someone who didn't understand exactly what game they were playing. Luis understood. Yes, he chose this. Chose to come after you, to break the rules, to gamble that he could outmaneuver me. Federico's voice was flat. He lost. That's how this world works. You win, or you lose. There's no middle ground. Eva sat in the chair opposite him, same position as their first real conversation, but the distance between them felt smaller now. What happens now? To me? Now you choose. Federico leaned forward slightly. Luis is dead. His organization is scattered. The people who wanted you dead either don't exist anymore or have bigger problems than revenge. You're safe, so I can leave. Yes, today if you want. We'll set you up with security for a few months, just precautionary, but fundamentally, you're free. He paused. Or you can stay. Eva's heart stuttered. Stay? Here, in the city, under my protection, if you want it. Not as a prisoner, as someone I choose to keep safe. Federico's expression was carefully neutral. I own the building. The penthouse has been empty for 2 years. You could live here, work wherever you want, build whatever life makes sense. No strings, no obligations, just the knowledge that if anyone comes for you, they go through me first. Why would you do that? Because I can. Because you deserve better than going back to a studio apartment and wondering if every car that passes is a threat. Federico's voice softened. Because I'm not ready to watch you disappear into a life where we pretend none of this happened. The confession hung between them, honest, vulnerable, completely unexpected, from a man who'd spent 3 decades building walls around anything resembling emotion. I don't know you, Eva said quietly. Not really. I know you saved me. I know you're dangerous. I know you dismantled an entire organization without blinking. But I don't know what you're like when you're not at war. I don't know if the person sitting here is who you actually are, or just another version you wear when it's useful. I don't know either, Federico admitted. I've been at war so long, I'm not sure what peace looks like. But, he hesitated, choosing words carefully, I'd like to find out. And I'd like you to be here when I do. Eva studied his face, the scars, the gray in his hair, the eyes that had seen too much and somehow still looked at her like she was someone worth protecting beyond obligation or strategy. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. In the diner, when you moved, when you threw yourself over me, Eva's voice trembled slightly. In that split second, what were you thinking? Federico was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried weight that had nothing to do with authority and everything to do with truth. I wasn't thinking. Thinking takes time, and time was the one thing I didn't have. He looked at her fully. I saw you standing there, this woman who hummed boleros and worked double shifts and deserved to go home tired instead of dead. And I was close enough to do something about it. So I did. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Federico's expression was raw. You want me to say I calculated your value? Weighed your life against mine and found the math acceptable? I didn't. I just moved. Because someone needed me to. Because for once in my life, I was close enough and fast enough, and I wasn't going to fail again. The silence stretched. Eva stood, crossed the space between them. Sat beside Federico on the sofa, close enough that their shoulders touched. I'll stay, she said quietly. Not forever, maybe not even for long. But I'll stay until I figure out who I am after all this. Until I know if the person I was before the glass broke is someone I want to go back to being. Federico's hand found hers. His palm was warm, scarred, surprisingly gentle for someone capable of such violence. Thank you, he said. For what? For not running. For trusting me when you had every reason not to. He stopped, started again. For surviving. Eva squeezed his hand. We both did. Outside, the city moved through its Thursday afternoon, oblivious to the small revolution happening in a penthouse where a Mafia boss and a waitress sat together in silence. 2 people who'd found each other in the space between bullets and decided that survival was only the beginning. Tommaso called an hour later. Luis's people had scattered as predicted. Diego Castellanos had disappeared, probably to Mexico or further south. The remaining Ortega operations were being absorbed by other families, distributed like inheritance. It was over. Eva stood at the windows as dusk painted the sky in shades of amber and ash. Behind her, Federico answered emails, managing an empire from a tablet while his body continued knitting itself back together. Federico? He looked up. Your sister, the one in Oregon. Eva turned to face him. Do you think she'll ever forgive you? No. His answer was immediate, honest. Some distances are permanent. Some choices can't be unmade. I'm sorry. Don't be. She's alive. She's happy. She got the life she deserved, even if it meant leaving me behind. Federico set down his tablet. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people you love is let them go. Is that what you're going to do? Let me go eventually? If that's what you need. He stood, moved to join her at the window. But until then, I'm here. For as long as you want me to be. Eva looked at their reflections in the glass, two people who shouldn't make sense together, who'd found connection in chaos and were now fumbling toward something resembling peace. I used to think my father was weak, she said quietly, for staying in a world that eventually killed him, for not walking away when he had the chance. And now? Now I think maybe he stayed because walking away would have meant abandoning people who needed him, even if staying cost him everything. She met Federico's eyes in the reflection. Maybe that's not weakness. Maybe that's just love wearing a different face. Federico's hand found hers again. They stood together as the city lit up beneath them, a million lights, a million lives, a million stories about survival and sacrifice, and the choices that defined who people became in the space between violence and grace. Welcome home, Federico said softly. And Eva, for the first time since glass exploded and blood pooled on checkered tile, believed him. Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.